Good morning, everyone. Apologies for the last-minute scheduling snafu. The next session in this track is going to be detecting the undetectable, threat hunting in appliance environments. Before getting to that, though, I'd like to thank our sponsors who make all of this possible, in particular ClearVector, who is one of our bronze sponsors. If you'd like to learn more about them, definitely go check out the booth that they have in the vendor hall. The following talk will be provided by Shahar, Dorfman, and Sagi Tzadik, and I believe they will be joining us remotely if we can patch them in.
Okay, so thank you everyone for attending our session. It's called Detecting the Undetectable, Threat Hunting in Appliance Environments. And in this session, we are going to present to you the methodology that we internally use in order to hunt sophisticated malware instances in virtual appliances. We'll also explain how we used features unique to the cloud to create a file prevalence graph, and why focusing on the long tail on the graph that you see on screen was extremely effective for threat hunting. But before we begin, let's do a quick introduction. My name is Sagi Tzadik. I work as a security researcher for the Wiz Research team.
And hi everyone, I'm Shahar Dorfman. I'm also a threat researcher at Wiz.
So in terms of what we are going to cover today, first we'll talk about the virtual appliance landscape. We'll do a quick introduction to virtual appliances and examine their presence in the cloud. Then we'll talk about challenges in threat hunting in virtual appliances and how the cloud can actually help us do this job better. Then we'll dive into two real-world examples where we actually use the methodology we present to you today to find previously undetected malware instances in the environments that we monitor. And we'll finish with some conclusions and final thoughts. So, what are virtual appliances? A virtual appliance is a pre-configured software application that includes all of its components, and essentially the vendor chooses the operating system, the application, and the dependencies for you. Now, virtual appliances are typically dedicated to a specific task, so you'll have virtual appliances for security purposes, for user management, for networking, and to put things simply, their setup is really simple, but it comes at the cost of flexibility. So you often have to treat virtual appliances some sort of a black box. Their file system is immutable to you because you don't often get root access to them, and it's really difficult to install monitoring tools on them. Now, I've been saying virtual appliances quite a lot to this point, so let's look at some examples. So whenever I'm saying a virtual appliance, I mean one of these products: Ivanti, Aviatrix, Fortinet, Cigna, essentially any of these software solutions that you have to embed in your environment as is. So let's talk about some security challenges in virtual appliances. First of all, it's really important to establish that virtual appliances are quite common in cloud environments and that they are often exposed to the internet. Now, our research actually found that they are occasionally running with high IAM permissions. For instance, 65% of the Aviatrix instances that we monitor are granted high IAM permissions in AWS environments. Now, as I mentioned previously, you often have to treat them as some sort of a black box, meaning that you lack visibility and that it's hard to monitor these devices. And for all of these reasons, virtual appliances had become a very high-value target for attackers. In fact, 23% of all known CVs, of all known exploited CVs in enterprise environment were found in an appliance. Now, as you can see on screen, during the past couple of years, there have been many incidents where a critical remote code execution vulnerability was discovered in a virtual appliance, which quickly became exploited in the wild by attackers. And with that, I'd like now to invite Shahar to talk about the visibility problem of virtual appliances.
Thank you, Sagi. So the biggest challenge in virtual appliance environments we would like to address today is the visibility problem. Many appliances restrict access to their file system, even for legitimate admins. This means that you, as the admin of the machine, can manage files on the machine and can upload your own custom file to the machine. In addition, you can't install tools or agents that you typically use for telemetry collection and detection of malicious activity. You can see here an example from Ivanti's documentation stating that the installation of antiviruses on the Ivanti appliance is restricted. When it comes to login, while some appliances do save access log to the machine, in many cases, those log files are minimal and they are usually hard to find. All of this makes it incredibly difficult to investigate suspicious activity on a virtual appliance. And that raises the question we would like to answer today, which is how do you investigate what you cannot see? Okay, so when we're investigating a potential attacker running a malicious code on a generally any virtual machine, we typically need two key types of information. First, we want metadata about the VM itself, like the instance name, AMI version, IAM context, and tags related to this machine. Second, we need host-level data, like what processes are running on this machine, how does the file systems look like, which versions of software are installed, and whether any secrets are exposed on the disk. As we said before, in virtual appliances, we have the visibility problem, making it hard to monitor or research this kind of information. In the cloud, however, we do have APIs that provide us some metadata about the machine, which is useful. But as we all know, this metadata alone is not enough to properly investigate an incident or understand what happened on the machine. So our solution to this is using the Snapshot API. You just find the relevant volume you want to investigate, then you create a snapshot out of it and attach it to an analysis system, essentially treating it like a forensic image. Then you can run YAR rules, ingest logs, and find anything you wanted before but didn't have. For example, you can find misconfigurations or known vulnerabilities exposed on the machine, secrets that were left on disk, malware, which OS is installed on the machine, and generally how does the file system looks like. Okay, so this snapshot method that is probably familiar to many of you isn't just valuable in virtual appliance environments, but it can be useful for any virtual machine investigation. But it works especially well in virtual appliances. That's because SSH access to those devices is usually restricted or minimal, and admins, as we said before, usually don't upload their own custom files to the machine, so most files remain identical across deployments. This means that any deviation or any unexpected change in the file system really stands out, and that's exactly what we try to leverage. Okay, so before we'll dive into some real-world case studies, we wanted to go over our virtual appliance threat research life cycle. So first, we start by selecting a specific appliance technology that we want to investigate. We usually choose something that is widely used or that is known to be vulnerable. Then, we collect files from different machines and different environments running this specific appliance technology. Using those files, we can build histograms of paths and hashes, and essentially build some kind of a baseline of how does the file system of this specific appliance should look like. Using this baseline, we can start looking for anomalies, for what we call the long tail, essentially paths that are present on small percentage of the machine running this specific appliance. Once we find those suspected files, we can enrich the information with logs, finding out who deployed the file, when did it happen, and how did it do it. This can help us find malware and exploitations of known and previously unknown vulnerabilities, which this is our prime goal in any research, actually. Okay, so once we have this, we can develop detections and ingest IOCs in order to uncover similar activities in different environments. Okay, so now that we've walked you through the process, let's take a look at how this played out in the real world.
Okay, so let's get started with our first case study of the day, which talks about remote code execution vulnerabilities in PAN-OS. So for anyone who's not familiar with PAN-OS, essentially it's the proprietary operating system that is developed by Palo Alto Networks in order to power their security products. And somewhere at the end of 2024, there were found two vulnerabilities that, when combined together, could be exploited to an unauthenticated remote code execution. Now, as you can see on screen, they quickly became exploited in the wild by attackers. Now, as Shahar mentioned previously, since PAN-OS is an appliance, this means that we can work under the assumption that the file system is pretty much immutable, as you don't often get root access to the machine. And this means that the file system between two different PanOS instances should be pretty much identical besides logs and configuration files. And this enables us to ask the question, are there any file present on the file system with an interesting extension, such as PHP, SPX, exe, etc.? And if there are, and they are only present on some of the machines that we monitor, this could be an indication of compromise. Another interesting question that we can ask is, are there any common files with a unique hash? So let's take, for example, the authorized keys file. This file is going to be present on all of the machines that we monitor, but if only on one machine it has a unique hash to it, this means that someone tried to intervene with this file and maybe tried to backdoor the machine by editing this file. So this could be an indication of compromise as well. Now, of course, there are other file system related metadata that we can use, such as file size, modification time, extended attributes, etc. So we analyzed all of the PanOS machines that we monitor, and we came up with the following graph. So here you can see on the x-axis the file path, and on the y-axis is how prevalent is this file among the PanOS machines that we monitor. So we can dissect this graph into a couple of groups. The first group would be files that are present on all of the machines that we monitor. We call these the stock files, meaning files that come with every PanOS. These are legitimate files and they are not suspicious. Then we have files that come with most of the instances, so between 90 and 100%. This could be explained due to version variations, meaning that at some versions, this file used to exist on a certain path, and in other versions, the same file exists on a different path. Then we have the group of files that exist only on some portions of the machines that we monitor, so between 10 and 70%. This could be explained due to plugins or popular add-ons, but the most interesting group here is the group at the long tail, files that are only present on 5% of the machines or less, and this is where we suspect to find malware. So let's focus on this long tail of the graph, on this group, and see what we can find. So if we look at the files with low prevalence, we can see that as we initially suspected, most of them are in fact malware instances, specifically of the web shell type. So let's have a look on the findings of this case. So by using this methodology, we managed to find numerous malware instances, with 4 of them being previously undetected, meaning that they had 0 hits on VirusTotal, which is pretty cool. And as you can see on screen, most of them are web shells. Now, in terms of next steps, we are really interested in understanding who are the attackers behind this attack. And we can start working towards answering this question by ingesting the log files from the compromised machines and start creating IOCs for the attacker based on them. So we can track the IP addresses that the attackers use, the user agent, perhaps they made some very unique browsing sequences that we can track, and we can use these IOCs in order to search for the same attackers across different environments that we monitor. Another interesting question is, are there any targets targeted by the same attackers? And we can work towards answering this question by creating YARA rules for the new malware instances that we found, and start hunting using these YARA rules on different environments that we monitor. And perhaps we'll find cases where the same attacker exploited a different vulnerability to install a similar implant.
Okay, great. So the second case study we'll talk about is the Ivanti Endpoint Mobile Manager Appliance. So the Ivanti EPMM is a software designed to help organizations manage and secure mobile devices, applications, and their access to the network. Just a couple of months ago, 2 vulnerabilities were found on the Ivanti EPMM appliance. Those vulnerabilities, when chained together, allow an attacker unauthenticated remote code execution on the Ivanti device, and from this device, potentially to other devices in the network. Only 3 days after the publication, a POC was published as well, and that was when we and other vendors started seeing exploitations of those vulnerabilities in the wild. Since the Ivanti EPMM is also an appliance, we applied the same technique here as well. In this case, we looked for the long tail, rare SHA-1 hashes that were linked to relatively large file sizes. So looking at files that were present on small percentage of the machine, it's easy to spot the files that have relatively large file size, those 3 files. Looking at those files and examine them, we found that the 2 of them were actually sliver implants. So to anyone who is not familiar, Sliver is an open source command and control framework written in Go. It's used for red teaming, but it's also being abused by threat actors as an alternative to tools like CoboStrike. Okay, so other than the sliver implants, we found several exploitations resulting in web shell deployments, reverse shell, MySQL dumps, and others. So as Sagi mentioned before, appliances are high-value targets, and we've observed exploitations of them by both opportunistic attackers and nation-state threats. So we really wanted to find out who stands behind the activities in the PAN-OS incidents and the Ivanti incidents. In this case, when we pivoted on mutual IOCs and researching malware and pivoted on DNS history, we managed to find what seems to be state-sponsored threat actor that stands behind both the PAN-OS incident and the Ivanti incident, as well as behind several other incidents that were resultant in exploitation of virtual appliances in the past 2 years. So it's really, really interesting. And now that the actor is uncovered, let's move on to some final thoughts. Okay, first, as we've shown today, even where traditional security tools struggle, like virtual appliance environment, we can still find new and creative ways to get access to the machine and provide visibility. The cloud actually also makes this process pretty scalable and more effective. We also talked about how virtual appliances are an important part of cloud environments. In many cases, appliances have high permissions and access to sensitive data. They're also often not protected by regular security tools, and sometimes people forget to monitor or update them. That's why attackers focus on them, and that's why we need better ways to detect and protect them. Having said that, we can't do it alone. Working with appliance vendors to expose more telemetry logging and more logging options is crucial. To end on a hopeful note, this method isn't just limited to virtual appliances. We chose them because they're often hard to investigate and tend to have similar file systems across deployments. However, we believe this approach can be adapted to other cloud systems as well, with just a few adjustments depending on the software. Hopefully, this technique will help improve visibility across many areas of the cloud. Okay, thank you everyone for listening.
And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you so much. We'll be taking questions in the room. If you have any, please raise your hand and I will bring this microphone over to you. Hopefully they're not too spread out across the room. Any questions?
Is there a way that customers who have these kind of appliances can do the same kind of file prevalence checking that you guys did to see if there's web shells in our environment? Like, are you going to publish how you did it and how we can do it?
Okay, so in order to create the graph that we showed on screen, this was done by taking a snapshot of the relevant appliance and simply listing all of the files in the snapshot. Because we monitor a lot of environments and we can see a lot of instances of the same appliance, it's much easier for us in order to create a file prevalence graph. But if you have multiple instances of the same appliance in your environment, you can apply this technique, or you can have it, or you can install like a stock version of the appliance and make like differences and see differences between the stock version and your production version of it. So I guess I hope this helps.
We also had some questions on Slack. First, does the snapshot option always work, or do some vendors have virtual appliance with encrypted disks with their own keys?
Yeah, some appliances do have encrypted disks, and then this method of the snapshot will not work actually. And I will also refer to the last question. We also think that if working with vendors that produce this appliance, if they will publish like the file path that are supposed to be on the appliance or hashes of those files, so maybe we can build like some kind of this baseline without needing to have so many machines in the environment. So this is another option, but it's not realistic for now.
Great. Another question on Slack. Does the snapshot approach also work for in-memory or fileless malware forensics?
So no, it will not work for fileless or in-memory implants in most circumstances. Yeah.
Another question. What kind of response did you get from the vendors? Are they thinking about allowing customers to have more access? Did we lose you on audio? Can you hear us now?
No, yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry.
We actually didn't approach vendors yet, so but we're planning on doing so.
Okay, no worries, makes sense. Any other questions in the room? All right, can we all get a round of applause for our wonderful speakers?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.